Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another very special episode of the Swans Cast podcast. And as I kind of teased last week, we are joined by a very special guest today, and that is former Swansea City manager Kenny Jackett. So thank you very much for your time, Kenny. Really looking forward to chatting to you this evening.
No problem. My pleasure, Luke.
So I'm sure many Swans fans are aware of Kenny Jackett and his history with Swans. He's obviously still in the footballing world, very much so at the moment. Managerial, correct me if any of this is a little bit incorrect, but as far as I can see, managerial career starting in 1996. You had a little bit of a stint with Watford, and I went on to 2022 with Leyton Orient. And in between, there's a few clubs. We've got Watford, Swansea, Manchester City Reserves, Millwall, Wolves, Rotherham, Portsmouth, and as I mentioned, Leyton Orient, and currently holding a sporting director role at Gillingham. Now, before we get into a Swansea City talk, we kind of wanted to ask, because that's what you're doing at the moment, what are the main differences then between the role you hold now to what you might have been experiencing before as a manager of a football club?
Yeah, the director of football role is more wide-ranging in the club. New owner took control of Gillingham along with a guy called Brad Gallinson, took control of Gillingham Football Club along with Paul Scally last Christmas, and then invited me in to be director of football and really advise them, work hard at squad planning, making sure that the recruitment is right, taking responsibility for key parts of the football part of the club, and it's as I said, quite a wide role in terms of the club, but one that I've enjoyed. And with new owners, they want to learn. They need the contacts. They want to learn the industry, and we've made good strides in the 10 months that we've been together.
Yeah. So Swansea obviously have a sporting director currently, Paul Watson, in the role, but I think it is interesting to know the difference, because I'm not sure that role's always been around in football, and I think a lot of clubs are using it more and more going forward. So it is interesting to see the difference and what that can bring, because a lot of higher management to get involved in different decision making, I think, as football develops as a sport. A little bit more the introduction then, but Kenny, as a player, was a one-club man, so maybe loyalty isn't seen as much these days in football, but 337 appearances for Watford between 1980 and 1990, and I know that ended prematurely, unfortunately, due to injury, but also having 31 caps for Wales as well. So very good career, and obviously on to managing as well. We mentioned, and everyone is aware, he did go on to manage Swansea City, I think in first full managerial job. His record read as played 163, won 75 of those, lost 48 and drew 40 games. So let's get started then with your time at Swansea City. And prior to coming to South Wales, you had a stint at QPR as assistant manager before you took over from Brian Flynn at Swansea in April 2004. At the time, I think it was called the Third Division, what we would now know as League Two for the younger listeners. So I just want to know, how did that come about? How did you come to take the Swansea City job?
Well, obviously I played for Wales. All of my family were from Swansea. My mother and father left Swansea to actually take a plane. My dad took a playing contract at Watford as they were newly married, and then had their family there. So, I had strong Welsh links and strong Swansea links in particular. So, it's always an area I was around. I was something that I followed, but up until that point, most of my roles in coaching had been either as a youth coach or as an assistant. And I think I'd spent up to the point of getting the Swansea job, I'd spent sort of 13 years at the staff of various clubs and doing different jobs, and I did think it equipped me very, very well to be able to go into either the head coach or the manager's role, as it's called now. And I was very, very fortunate then to apply, have an interview with Hugh Jenkins, and then be given the job as well. So it was I was very honoured at that particular time with the links that I had and the family links that I had that I could actually hold down then the Swansea job.
That's great. So it was sort of an easy decision to come down to Swansea then. I I didn't realise you had so many ties at the time to
Yeah,
Swansea.
I wanted to break into management, definitely, from being a coach, and I felt I was ready for it. That was the thing. But obviously, Swansea was a club and an area very close to all of my family's heart. And as I said, my mum and dad both from Swansea, all of our relatives from that area, as they still are. So it's something that I'd followed, and to be able to then get an interview and finally get the job, it was a fantastic chance for me, an opportunity.
Yeah, I think the proof is there that you were definitely ready for it as well, because you took us from where we were at the time to where we were when we eventually left the club. But what was the club like when you got there? Were you expected? Because I mean, it was only the season before that we actually survived on the last day from falling out of the Football League. So, and obviously you mentioned Hugh Jenkins as well was quite new to the club. So what was the club like at the time? Was it what you expected?
Yeah, it was a relatively new board, and as you said, with Hugh Jenkins heading it, and Brian Flynn had built a pretty good squad. I felt I didn't inherit some very good players and some good people as well. They're very good people. So I came into a setup that didn't need. I didn't think major reconstruction. That was important. We were a year away from moving into the new stadium. And this was then going to be the final year at the Vetch, but we wanted to go into the new stadium with momentum. So that final year, there was a little bit of pressure there, good pressure to be towards the top end of the league, competing if we could, getting promoted in the last year of the Vetch, and as I said, giving us some momentum going into the new stadium, which we achieved. But as I said, Brian Flynn had left us a good squad. It needed work, definitely, in that particular summer. But as well as that, there were some good people around.
I know you mentioned that you needed a little bit of work in the squad. Can you sort of highlight any of the areas that, when you did take over, you thought that you needed to address, and some of the players that you brought in to do that?
Yeah, I felt we had, some very good players. We had Lee Trundle there. We had Andy Robinson, who, had played big parts in the development of the club. Those two, and in terms of scoring goals, creating goals at the top end of the pitch, they were both fantastic players. Leon Britton was there. Kevin Nugent was there, who went straight away into a role as assistant manager to myself, and helped me a lot as I was new to the club. And so, I talk about key people and a key person, if you like. Although on the pitch he was coming away from it then and stepped into a coaching role. He really helped me sort of hit the ground running, if you like, when I did come to the club. So he was a key person. But on the pitch, I mentioned Trundle, I mentioned Robinson, lads like Christian O'Leary. Chris O'Leary made a fantastic contribution. Roberto was playing, as I said. Leon Britton was playing. We actually then needed to make sure defensively we were a lot stronger. We brought in the likes of Gary Monk.
Yeah.
Was a big signing. Sam Ricketts, Kevin Austin, Adrian Forms gives us some physicality wide, and a goalkeeper called Willie Guerre, who had a fantastic season as well. Alan Tate was already there, and although been a younger lad, if you like, was a year. So each year Alan Tate got better. In different roles, whether it be right back or centre back, he progressed and got better every year. So that was the makeup of the squad. So the big thing is, when you go into a club, is identifying what you have, what are the strengths and what you need. And Kevin Nugent, Hugh Jenkins, they helped me make that assessment pretty accurately to capitalise on the strengths that we had. The likes of Trundle and Robinson, and to make sure that the Gary Monks and the Sam Ricketts, etc., that come in, made sure we give those boys a service and were a compliment to them on the field.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the names you just mentioned there, I think, especially for people in like mine and Luke's age group, like iconic names with the club, like you said, like Trundle, Forbes. Forbes is probably one of my favorite Swans players of all time. So that segues nicely into the next bit. I was going to ask, like, we eventually obviously achieved promotion away at Bury that season with Forbes scoring the winning goal. So he was heavily involved on the pitch. So, and then obviously you mentioned Willie Gray as well, getting arrested that day as well. So what was that day like? 'Cause I think it was just a bit of a crazy day. There's so many Swans fans went to bury that day, I think it's just one of the biggest days in the club's history, really, because we've never really looked back from that day. So what was that like? What was that like for you? I mean, achieving your first promotion, and what was the day like for you?
Yeah, it was a fantastic day, and as you say, the momentum of the season had built up. So many supporters went. You know, the turnout, the atmosphere in the ground was fantastic. I can just remember it going into 3 or 4 minutes of injury time. We were obviously 1-0 up, and that win was gonna take us up automatically. And the Swans supporters were over the barrier and actually standing on the touchline behind the goal, on the goal line. You know, there was sort of a third of the pitch they were ready to run on, and the referee pushed them back a couple of times, but then they crept back. I tried to run the clock down a little bit, and I'd taken Lee Trundle off, and 85, 88 minutes, something like that. And I actually sent Truns round to try to say to them, look, come on, don't get the game abandoned or anything like that. You know, you have to step back. So Truns gone behind the goal to say, look, come on, guys, you know, another 5 yards, get back behind the barriers. But in the end, the referee I just thought he'd had enough of it, if you like, and blew the whistle. Fantastic result, great day, as you say, which finished off a big achievement, you know, by the club. It set the ball rolling, getting out of League Two that particular year, and a really good mix of players. I can then remember the celebrations after, where you know some stewards and some policemen told Willie not to climb up onto, I think he was only on the top of the dugout or some part of the stand. Anyway, the guys they were only doing their job. They were telling him not to get up, and he wanted to get up and support with the, you know, and join in with the supporters, if you like. So he took no notice of them, and then it took about 6 of them to carry him out into the police van and down the station down the road. So we had to go and get him after. But it wasn't the best decision from him to ignore the police there. But we understand why he did it. Yeah.
Amazing day. There's just so many Swans fans this day remember that one in particular, even though we've had obviously some big days that have followed as well. I think a lot of people will still remember that and talk about.
But it did get the ball rolling, and it created some momentum. Going into then the new stadium, it did give us a lot of positivity, if you like, season ticket sales, and you know, as I said, there was a lot of those players there Brian Flynn brought in. And he was very instrumental, you know, I felt, because not just that, there was, you know, the likes of Kevin Nugent, Richard Evans. There were some good people behind the scenes there that contributed and you know made a real big contribution in terms of building the club and getting it moving in the right way.
Yeah, I think some of the stuff you're talking about there is the celebrations. I know we maybe talk about the funny side of the stuff with Willie Gouret and the police and all that, but the fact that those things happen and the fans get involved, I think that just describes the connection maybe the club had with the fans at the time. And you know, you might not be as familiar as you were back then, but Swansea at the moment is suffering a little bit from a lack of connection with the fans. I think looking back at our history, I think those moments show exactly why and how important those things are, really. But your success that season didn't just stop at the playoffs. You also lifted the FAW Premier Cup trophy in what was the last ever match played at the Vetch Field. So another special day under your reign, where you beat Wrexham 2-1. So how special was it to be in charge of the club when they said goodbye to their historic and iconic home ground, and of course the North Bank as well?
It was a fantastic season for me personally. The amount of family I had at every game, I really did feel the pressure. The cousins, the family, the friends, and as I said, you know, we got the momentum going. The crowd got right behind the players. There's a good connection. Whenever you are successful, and a lot of focus is on managers now, but and boards of directors, etc. But you know, the big connection is between the fans and the players. If ever you can create that one, then you are in for success. If the crowd enjoy, and then one feeds off the other, and it did that particular season, building up to, as we've said earlier, a promotion, which is always hard to get. It got the ball rolling, We wanted to then, win that particular cup that you're talking about. It was the last ever game at the Vetch, which was, a fantastic place to play football. The North Bank generated a great atmosphere all of the time, and we had to go into that game and make sure we could do the job. And we finished off the season strong and win that particular cup and sign off with the Vetch with a win over Wrexham. So it was a real big win for us. I can remember at the end, obviously the celebrations. There was some celebrations for the season, if you like, but obviously people cutting parts of the turf out, taking seats home.
It's crazy.
Up to the dressing room and. All the kit was gone. The training kit out the back room was gone. The youth team footballs, every single thing would, people were taking mementos from everywhere. And as I said, it signed off the stadium in a great way.
I think if anyone has got a memento, just let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, I've still got my seat in the house somewhere. It's still there, and I've got a bit of turf that was, planted in the garden, and it's still there. And you meet people over the years now, and they say, "Oh, I've got this sign, and I've got this, I've got so there's bits of the Vetch dotted all around Swansea, I think, just in people's houses." But no, it was I forever miss the Vetch. It was a special place to go, and
the North Bank. When you got it going, the North Bank to generate exactly 100% the right reasons, and the new stadium, great, the right decision and a great decision, and the club needed that. But as I said, the stadium did need a send off, and it got one that year.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was a brilliant send off. Was it? Did you find that it was? And you mentioned there was a sort of an added pressure that it was the last the last season at the Vetch. It was kind of a bit of pressure that we had to kind of be successful that season. But was it a distraction for the players day to day in training? Because I just remember the run into that season. It was like, oh, it's the last game under the lights. It's the last 3:00 game. It was something every week. It was the last whatever it was at the Vetch. Was that a distraction, or was it kind of business as normal as the season went on?
No, it wasn't a distraction. Definitely, it gave the whole thing and the whole season an edge. The club had momentum, or was building up momentum pretty quickly, and every player and every person wanted to be a part of that. And so, if there was any pressure, it was a good pressure, and you could feel the enthusiasm in the stadium, but in the city, driving everybody on, and the players then responded very well.
So I know you've already spoke about some of the players that were iconic in that first year and brought in by maybe Flynn, but really important to you. Andy Robinson, one of those players, he scored the last ever goal at the Vetch, and he was definitely a fan favourite during his time at the club. Some of the others include Martinez, as you mentioned, Gary Monk, Leon Britton, Lee Trundle, Alan Tate. I'm just wondering, have you got any stories from any of those players in particular that the fans would love to hear? Like Leon Britton, for example, he ended his career in a much different role to maybe what was he was used as during your time. So how important were those players, and is there any moments that stand out in your memory from them?
Yeah, they were terrific players, and as you said, Leon was brought in his initial days. I can remember him back before Swansea at West Ham, where he'd been an England youth player as a central midfield player, was then moved wide and played wide right for quite a number of years in a wide right position, probably dovetailing with Forbes slightly at that time, before then coming inside and really dominating. Got then through to probably once you guys got in the Championship, etc. He really, I did think, coming to his own in central midfield and ended up being a fantastic player. For Swansea, one of the best Swansea players, definitely, and in that central midfield role, could really dominate and was fantastic on the ball. Yeah,
he definitely was outstanding and so important in our lives.
As well, as top person, in terms of Leon Britton was matured and developed into a real leader at Swansea, and he was quite young when I was there, but and a very good professional as well. But also then as he matured, he developed into a leader and had a fantastic career and massive contribution to Swansea.
he's still here now. He still lives in the city, I believe, and he's had contributions elsewhere around the city after not being a player anymore. So I'm sure he's still got more to give before he maybe his time is up at doing anything associated with football. I'm sure we'll see a lot more of him.
Yeah,
I'm sure you will, and he loves the place. I've seen him at, there's been a few dues that some get-togethers, charity games or whatever. He can still play, by the way. He was doing a little bit with the 21s a year or so back, wasn't he? As well, joining in with Chris O'Leary. But fantastic servant and loves Swansea City.
Yeah. So that's the closing of the Vetch. Then sadly, the Vetch shuts down and we move into the new stadium. It's quite interesting because it's quite rare. Teams don't move stadiums that often these days. So what's that like as a manager? So especially how different the new stadium is compared to what the Vetch is. It's kind of two different worlds, isn't it? So what was like that leading into that first season? How does that differ as a manager trying to lead? It's almost like a new club in that new stadium. So what was that like for you? Was that a challenge?
It was great for me, great for myself and the players. I can remember going pretty early on in my first year, the last year at the Vetch, going and it was nearly built and just signed a lad called Akinfenwa, and again, big contribution up front with Trundle that particular year. Robinson wide one side as well. So myself and Bayo went quite early, putting the hard hats on. Seeing it develop, and all you want then as the manager, as a coach, as a player is to be part of that once you're going forward. And both of us got that opportunity that next season to be able to do that. Bayo quite early on had some injuries, some injuries to his shin that kept him out for quite a long while. But he did start off in the new stadium and did very well. And again, one of the players that made a big contribution on and off the pitch. But say for myself though, it took the whole thing to another level. It felt more professional, and was really equipped the club, if you like, to be able to move up the leagues, which it did. That first year there was a lot of momentum. We got into the playoffs. Unfortunately, lost on pens to Barnsley, and it was very, very close to being two promotions in 2 years, and we certainly gave it a good go.
Yeah, we'll probably come back to that the playoff experience against Barnsley in a second, but I just wanted to ask about some of the signings that you had. I know you mentioned Akinfenwa, so Trundle maybe was seen as the star man up front, I think. But going up the leagues, I'd imagine you need a bit more firepower. So we saw Akinfenwa come in, we saw Rory Fallon, Leon Knight, and obviously other players across the team. Have you got any stories? You've just told us about Akinfenwa, and he's definitely an instrumental character in Swansea and in the wider football spectrum now as well. I think he's quite iconic for what he's put out to the football community. So from the other guys that you might have brought in that first season then at the Liberty as well, have you got any others that stand out for you?
Yeah, as I said, Akinfenwa came out of non-league, and we and I say we as a club gave him an opportunity to come, from non-league and establish himself as a league player, and it was a chance that he took despite some injury problems, with his shins in the latter part of his career. Talk about Trundle though. Trundle was a star player. He could turn a game, Lee. He was reliable. To score a high amount of goals during the course of the season. He'd have some quiet games, but even in those quiet games, you would still think as a manager that he could still pull a goal out of nowhere. So he was a big player, a very big player for us. And I mentioned Trundle and Robinson, but they were right up there in terms of players being able to do that. Gary Monk, I think, was fantastically, we talk about Britain, but Gary Monk, I thought, was fantastically consistent as well. And he'd been at Southampton before he joined us. He'd been at Southampton and just constantly out on loan and hadn't really found the home, if you like. And I think we signed him from Barnsley, where again he'd gone there short term, We brought him in, and it was interesting to see, like Leon Britton, how he developed with the club and went right the way through. But in those early days, he really helped us in terms of being able to play out, being able to pass out, but then being a player that played every game and was a very, very solid and reliable defender. And then on past my time, went on to form a fantastic partnership, I thought, with Ashley Williams. But he hit the ground running, and I think really going into the new stadium and the higher standard of football, I think Gary was one of the ones that responded the best. And that particular season, just going into the new stadium, he's somebody that really matured during that period and contributed very well.
Yeah. I mean, you've touched on some of the players there. I think, like you said, that the time that you were at the club, I think is probably one of the most iconic. I think, like you said, Britain, Monk is, they were there for a long time, and it did set the ball rolling in where the club did end up, and we were very successful on that basis and moving to the stadium. But I remember the firepower we had that season. I mean, one game that really still to this day really sticks in my head is when we beat Bristol City at home 7-1. I remember that was a special day. Is that one that still sticks in your mind? Is there any other games that kind of eclipse that, or is that still one of the top games?
No, it's one of the top games. Kevin McLeod got a hat trick from the left wing, who started very, very well, and there's a number of players there that made an impact, and it was a part of their journey, if you like. Kevin would be one of them. Bayo Akinfenwa would be part of them. The other guys that we've just talked about, and some big personalities there. Roberto Martinez, Kevin Nugent, Chris O'Leary, Richard Evans. Some of those in the spotlight, some just behind. A lot of those people made big contributions on and off the field. Not only just where you, as we talked about, some real iconic players there, but there was a lot of very, very good people there as well. And Hugh Jenkins was good at that. I felt his judgment and his trust of people was a strength of his, and he employed and kept around a number of people that were very, very strong at that time.
Just on Hugh Jenkins then, while you've mentioned him, how was he at that period, like in terms of working with him? I guess for you at the time, you were a new manager coming to one of your first jobs. Maybe it was one of your first experiences dealing with a chairman, and he was also quite a new chairman. So compared with what you might have had to deal with in your later jobs, how was it to work with Hugh Jenkins? Is he different to other chairmen, or quite similar in regards to what he does, or does it feel a little bit more localised here at Swansea? Because he came in, I think it's fair to say, as a fan, I guess, into that role.
Yeah, he did. And the one thing about Hugh, Lee Denis, people like that, they wanted somebody around about their own age that they could work with at that time. That was part of the remit, if you like. And while they maybe wanted some knowledge of players in and around, let's say, the English leagues that could help us, they knew Swansea very, very well, and I felt they knew the club very well, and what would work with the supporters. And a big focus of theirs was getting to the new stadium, making sure the facilities were upgraded. Something they did right the way through, not just with the stadium that Swansea are in now, but the advancement of the training facilities, and so they were really big into those things, making sure that the whole club was as professional as possible and every area improved. And they did have they had opinions on the pitch, definitely. There's no doubt about that, but they were very good in terms of judging people that were honest, that wanted to work, but also they knew that they needed a better infrastructure at Swansea to be able to move up the leagues and stay there, which is something that they did get that judgment right. They were, let's say, a group of supporters, but supporters with the club at heart, and knew what it took to be successful at Swansea.
Well, they did that all the way up, I think, to the Premier League, and I'd even say one of Hugh Jenkins as chairman's lasting legacies is what he left the club in terms of his infrastructure, the money that was spent wisely when we got to the Premier League to leave us in a place better for the long term, if you like.
Yeah, and you're looking for where they where they took the club from when we nearly went out of the league.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we sort of experienced, when I went into Gillingham at Christmas time, we were 6 points off the bottom of the league, and it's difficult to get back out. There's a cycle, and to bounce back from going out of League Two into the National League that's a tough one. So Swansea avoided that. They picked up the club when it was needed. A lot of people may have left it alone at that period.
Yeah.
It might have been difficult, and
Yeah.
as I say, they built it stage by stage, and one way or another produced a time in Swansea's history that'll never be forgotten.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I think I just want to pick one up there. You mentioned there about Hugh Jenkins. They had an idea about what was going on the pitch as well. I think at the moment there's a lot of fans that are sort of desperate for us to be playing a certain way, and calling it the Swansea way, and they really want to see us play a certain style of football. Was that something that was challenged to you at the time from the chairman and from the board? Were you sort of asked to play a certain style of football, or was it purely results at the time?
Yeah, definitely moving from the Vetch to the new stadium, if you like, was something that did need to be developed and changed, and past the let's say the Barnsley season where we lost on penalties in the final. The next season, then after myself, Roberto picked that up very, very well. Again, somebody that knew the club, had his own ideas in terms of what was needed at that time. People like Tate and Britton Gary Monk, as we said before, were maturing nicely. They signed Jason Scotland in that summer as well, which was quite a big signing in terms of a player in the 4-3-3 that could play up front on his own. So the club kept evolving and kept developing. And I do think Hugh always had in his mind that that 4-3-3 blueprint he wanted to play. It was a challenge for myself, definitely, to be able to evolve that, because you need the players, certainly out from the back. You need the players to be capable both in possession, but then still be good enough defenders. And there were people like Alan Tate and Gary Monk that developed into that. Sam Ricketts, very, very good and can both defend and could play. And then, as I said, beyond myself, with people like Ashley Williams, they added brilliantly to keep the whole thing moving.
Yes, it's interesting to see how the club did evolve during that period, and obviously Martin has taken over as well after you continued the success. And you mentioned the Barnsley playoff final there, and again we're going to get to that in a second, but you did actually win some silverware again that season in your second year at the club. 2 pieces of silverware, in fact. Defended the FAW Cup, I believe, against Wrexham again by the same scoreline, if I'm correct, 2-1. It seems to be a theme in the cup finals. And also beating Carlisle United in the Johnson's Paint Trophy at the time, I believe it was called. In the final as well, another 2-1 victory. So the highlight for that, for me, was Lee Trundle scoring a stunning volley, which I think has given Swans fans some definitely some amazing memories to remember from your period. Also providing the assist for Adebayo Akinfenwa's winning goal in that match. Adebayo Akinfenwa actually went on to call it the best day of his life at the time in an interview that I was reading from back then. So how was that day for you?
It was a fantastic day. That competition builds up, but by the time you're in and around the semi-finals and then the final, you think, come on, we've got to win this. We have to win this. The support builds up. It's a one-off day, and us going on and win that was terrific. There is a wider picture. I do wonder whether those 2 cup competitions did it actually help us in terms of the league. It brings more games. It brings more fatigue, brings more injuries. Was that the case? You do wonder that along the way. It's definitely something of what I've thought about. But you still can't take away the feeling on that day of winning and the atmosphere in the stadium and the support after being so fantastic. So you have to take it. You have to take it for what it is.
Yeah, and you mentioned maybe the momentum or maybe the fixture congestion from the extra competitions. Did that actually help you? That's something I was going to ask, because obviously you came up, you carried that momentum forward. You spoke about it, the new stadiums, a lot of momentum around the club. So to do so well and get yourself after the promotion into a position where you're going for another promotion, I believe you were top around Christmas on New Year's Day, actually top of the league. So maybe them competitions didn't help because you ended up falling into a playoff battle, which ultimately, as we know, you went to Barnsley in the final at the Millennium Stadium and fell to defeat to them on penalties. Now, I know Akinfenwa and Alan Tate were the two that potentially didn't convert as well as in training in the penalty shootout. So just around that day and that final, you spoke a lot about the momentum. How did this affect it? Was it a big disappointment? Was it difficult to kind of move on from and pick players up after that? How did that affect the momentum in terms of where you were going at that time as a club?
The following season.
No, yeah. So going into the following season, but the day itself, how did you deal with the defeat in the playoff final?
Yeah, it was difficult. I did feel we were the better side. You know, we were it was obviously, you know, it was obviously a tie, but we were the side pushing to win the game, and Barnsley were like really hanging on for penalties, and that was the nature of it. You know, then you look back as a manager and you're looking at maybe one or two substitutions. Could they have helped us? Could they have helped us gain a little bit more control? You know, you always those things always run through your mind slightly. But you still then, you know, after everything, you know, you can't take away the fact that we'd won a lot of games that season. Once the dust settles, we've won a lot of league games, we'd won a lot of cup games, but ultimately you do feel like you've lost, you know, you've fallen at the last hurdle, and getting over then a playoff defeat under those circumstances can be difficult, and
yeah,
you know, no doubt about that. That's the way it is, and we were very close. But I'm very proud though of the season. When I look back, you know, I do feel that the actual cup competitions did they help us? I don't know. But being able to get over disappointments is a big part of football, and how you handle that, because disappointments will come, whether it's at the top end, if you like, you know, where you know you're losing on penalties in a playoff final, or you know, or maybe a relegation, if you like, you know, and picking yourself up the next year. Getting over that is a really important one and a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking at the end, but I think when you kind of step back and look at it, I mean, you know, I remember being devastated on the day as well. It's just such a cruel way to lose a playoff final. But then when you look back at it now, you think we're only, you know, with everything, like you said, even with all the extra competitions, we're only a penalty shootout away from, you know, back-to-back promotions, 2 cups that season. So I think, you know, what a fantastic season that was. I think, you know, we can't complain too much. You know, we would have loved to have gone up at the time, but yeah, I think it was, you know, an amazing season. That one in particular. Did that? So going back a bit to what Luke touched on, does that have an effect in the way you lose the playoff final? Does that have an effect going into next season? Is it hard to pick the players up and the club after that?
Yeah, I think what changes is that the atmosphere slightly changes. You know, you're starting next year, because I talk about the connection between the players and the supporters, and you know, there was a little bit of a lull at the start of the next year with the players, a little bit more pressure on the manager, definitely. Whether you like it or not, that's modern day football. You have to understand that, you know, then you're going into the third year, if you like, and I was going into my third year, and you know, if you in that role, I mean, in my career, I was at Millwall for 6 years. I was at Swansea for 3 years, Wolverhampton 3 years, and Portsmouth 3 years. So that's, you know, they're quite long stints in the shelf life of a manager stroke head coach, aren't they? You know, it's just what it is. It's just, it naturally builds up, and you know, and definitely that over that summer and then the start of the next, there was a little bit of a lull that I think the players could feel, and the, you know, the positivity of the crowd wasn't quite there, and then it is our job to build that up again during that course of that season. You know, that's where it is, because as much as you want the crowd to drive you on and and pick you up. It is really your job, one as a manager and two as the players, to be able to then generate the performances and the control in the game that can build the season up very, very quickly. It does need to be top 2, top 3, round about that next year. Then in terms of standards, but because as I said, it naturally builds up. It did build up. Around about 6th or 7th was just about okay. That's about where it is, and hence that was summed up the next season.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe the fact that you had such good times and success since you've been at the club, get to the back-to-back playoffs, or you got the promotion, nearly got the promotion again. The fan expectations maybe all of a sudden have gone to a level that they weren't at before, and I guess if you're not quite matching that, does it just make the job that extra hard? Did you feel that pressure from maybe the fans especially?
You do, yeah, definitely. You feel, what the what the fans feel. Definitely, 100%. You do. You're looking at the side, and was the side quite as good as it had been last year? Were certain people as on form? Did you need to just move it on slightly as well? And also there'd be certain players in some, a little bit of a transition, if you like. So all of those things are part of keeping the momentum going, and the managers that can do that, are brilliant at it. They're very successful. The managers at the top can do that. Alex Ferguson could do that. He could maybe finish 2nd or 3rd in the Premier League one year, and then the next year win it again. With the right decisions, and be able to do that. And it's a tough part of management. It's a big part, and we got caught a little bit in between, in terms of the next year. And while we were always in touching distance, if you like, we did have ambition to be, a championship club, and rightly so as well. That was the ambition. And as I said, 3 years as a head coach or a manager these days is a good innings.
It definitely is a good innings. And you said about the ambitions to get to the championship, and you signed some players that helped after you had left to get there eventually. One of those was Darren Pratley, who signed that season, and I know he went on to captain the club as well. So how important was he in your plans? And obviously he took over one of the previous captains, Roberto Martinez, was a fan favourite, and he moved on. Was that a difficult situation to manage as well?
Yeah, Darren was very young when we signed him from Fulham, and again matured well and pretty quickly at Swansea. Very, very well. For Roberto, who made as a player a real big contribution in the promotion season, and he did as the team got more athletic. We needed more athleticism in the middle of the field with it. Lads like Darren Pratley were, as always happens, were coming up. Leon Britton was establishing himself as well, and the midfield just did need to be more dynamic, past players like Roberto, players like Chris, that had made big contributions in getting the club there. For Darren anyway, he was somebody that again, along with the lads like Gary Monk, matured with the club and developed with the club, and as you say, then went on to have a real successful period at the club. When he first came, he was all energy and pretty leggy with it. His game developed, his control developed, standard of his passing. Made him pretty quickly, I think, a very popular player and a fan's favourite.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's, like I said, it's amazing how many players that that came into the club at that time actually stayed for such a long time and had such a big influence on.
Well, he
where the
scored
club
in
went.
a championship, didn't he, in a playoff semi.
And developed with the club, though. As
exactly,
the club improved, and as the team evolved, because it did evolve, it evolved better through quite a number of managers. And I think Hugh's saying to me that I was probably one of the longest serving, I think, or at 3 years. I think it was, and in the journey through to the, to the Premier League, and then the early years in that, I think, I was one of the longest serving with 3 years, but, it kept evolving, the players through maybe 2 or 3 coaches or managers, kept improving and went with the club. And it's the mark of a successful club and side that can do that.
Yeah. So moving on from that, unfortunately, then you obviously resigned from the role at the Swans. So I think, like we sort of touched on, I think it's sort of been a victim of your success, really, because where we were when you took over to where we were when you left, I don't think anybody can argue that it was a successful run. So I'm just interested to hear if you've got anything to share about what actually made you decide to step down from the role. Was it a bit of pressure from the fans, or just other factors? Just interested to see why you ended up leaving the club.
Yeah, you do feel sometimes you've taken it as far as you can, and obviously then the relationship with the board. Those guys have been very, very good to me. The likes of Hugh Jenkins and everything were excellent to myself. And then there is times where you need a new challenge, and so does the club. And it's quite often the obvious thing. However it happens, whatever you call it. But Hugh, Lee Denis, people like that, they were very, very good to me, professionally and personally, and were and have been even since I've left. It would be fantastic if the role of a manager could go on to have several cycles at one club, but it isn't. There's a cycle to it, and if there's a lull for maybe a year or 18 months while the next crop are developing or the side is gelling, inadvertently there's at least one change, and that's modern day football. So I accepted that. I've got to say I thoroughly enjoyed my 3 years. The people I worked for there were very, very good to me. I do appreciate that, and always then going back or coming across the Swansea supporters, as I've done many times, since I've left. There's been fantastic appreciation for part of the journey, or the leg of the journey, if you like, that I played, and I'm very proud as well to say, for some small part, I played a part in the development of a great club, and for myself, it established me as a manager as opposed to a coach, and that was a big step for me and my family as well, and it was Hugh that gave me that opportunity, because I'd established myself as a coach. And felt that I could get coaching jobs, which I did, but that took me then to be able to get other jobs and other jobs and other promotions and into another role there that I had to learn quickly, but one that I could build a career on.
Yeah, I think I think it's a great period, and I'm not just saying this obviously because you've come on the podcast, but I think it was one of the a major factor in where the club ended up. So I think you did play a massive role in that. I mean, like we touched on, you've got the club from where it was at the time where you took over to where it was when you left. I think is a massive influence somewhere on the success of the club today. I know you've obviously talked about Hugh Jenkins as well, but you in particular as well played a massive role in that. So I guess thanks from a fan's perspective, and it was an enjoyable time as a Swans fan, no doubt.
The supporters have been fantastic to me all down the years, and many times, and I do go back, see family a lot, and they've always been very, very good. But that period from Brian, who signed some key players, to myself, to then Roberto really breaking through in terms of it's a big breakthrough to then get into the top leagues, if you like, away from the and be able to take it on. And I don't know if he was there maybe 2.5 years, Roberto, but then
something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did. But I think what he did in that time, again, he took the good parts that he'd been left. He didn't knock it all down, if you like. He added and might have been Kevin Reeves in terms of the signings as well. There were some key signings that added to what we'd done and the players that we had. Lee had moved on then. I think Lee Trundle moved on to Bristol. In pre-season one year, which was potentially difficult, but I thought that at the time they dealt with that very, very well, and the club and the side went from strength to strength through that. So it evolved again and kept moving.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, there's currently a vacancy if you fancy doing it all again.
I'm all of my work now, all of my job
Yeah, that's fair.
is towards working on the recruitment side. Yeah, and there's somewhere I'm going to stick now. Going back to the dugout isn't something I'm going to do, but yeah, anywhere where I can help in the wider picture of the club, and in particular the recruitment is where I see. But I've got to say though that Swansea is always a club that I make sure 2 or 3 times a season I see them, and I watch and enjoy doing it, and I always follow the club. Not just first team, but then below that as well, because there's several players in terms of 21s and youth sides, the development of the training ground plural, and watching how that's gone on, and for this next stage, if you like, where they go now, I'll be keen and I'll be interested.
Yeah, well, we'll talk a little bit about current Swansea in a second. I just want to maybe close up your time at the club and just ask. Okay, so you had a successful time at the club. We know that. We're fully aware of it. But now you've had a lot more experience in other managerial jobs. When you reflect and look back, do you think there's anything you might have done different, or any opportunities missed, maybe, or do you think maybe no, as it was important for my career and I learned a lot from how it happened? Was there anything you would have changed if you could go back now?
Into the Swansea role?
When you were at Swansea, yeah.
Yeah, into the Swansea role. Maybe been a bit sharper on the recruitment. I think that's very, very important as with any. I went in with a real clear picture of all of the players that we needed really, and maybe the development of the recruitment side needed to be better, so that you need to be one step ahead in recruitment.
Yeah.
And I remember Hugh telling me, it was after I'd gone, but he did say, to me, good scouting can be up to 2 years ahead. And with the contractual situations, it's actually true. It can be up to that period. Now, if you told supporters that's very difficult. Yeah. But in essence, it is a long game. It is a lot. There'll be the odd one where it's there, bang, you do it. And that's great, and the contractual situation falls in. But a lot of the time with your targets, you have to play a patient game, and Swans have been very good at that over the years, and through Hugh's time, he did that. And so making sure you put building blocks in place, because the time goes pretty quickly in terms of then the summertime comes around and you need to really shape that squad and make it stronger.
Yeah, I think just to make that an example, you say Swansea do it very well. I can relate to the fans here and say, obviously this summer we signed someone called Josh Key, who we've been linked with for several transfer windows previously. Maybe he didn't want to pay a fee, but we managed to get him this summer then when he's run his contract down from Exeter. And he's been actually a really important player for us. So it still goes on today.
Done well, yeah.
Yeah, he's done fantastic. But yeah, that would be a great time then to maybe move on to the current situation at Swansea. And there's some similar themes that we've discussed, I think, maybe towards the end of your reign, where the pressures change and impacts of the fans. At the moment, Michael Duff, obviously, he's been moved on from Swansea at the moment. Unfortunately, we're in a situation that we wouldn't choose to be in if we could choose as fans. But the fans in general were quite vocal about displeasure about the playing style, and I think a lot of what the frustrations are of the fan base have been heard by the board and has ultimately resulted in a decision, or had an impact in making that decision. Whether it came sooner than it would have otherwise, I'm not sure. There's obviously other factors. I just want to know, from a manager's side, like, have you ever had experience of this to that level in other jobs? Or when you've seen it with other managers, do you look at it and think, oh, that's quite a difficult situation to navigate? Like, how does that affect you as a manager when you hear or see fan bases getting so disconnected, if you like, to the club and maybe what they're seeing?
Yeah, I think you have to accept it. It's just part of the industry we love. It moves quickly. I mean, the old one's always been, if you look at the team photo at the start of a season, and then you look in 2 or 3 years' time, and so many people change. Has been that way. It's certainly, you have to accept that it's ever changing. So as a manager, it's it's not a great part of it, but it is a part of it. And Swansea are in that transition now. And again, only from the outside, I don't know the people well. Met them definitely, but one wouldn't profess to know them. But I do think from the outside they'll go back to a passing style, a modern style. There's lots of coaches in the lower divisions that play that. There's lots of coaches that are working as number twos and number threes, either in the Premier League or in some of the top leagues around Europe that can play that style and do it effectively, and with winning football. And I do think that the board at Swansea will have a short list and appoint a manager that has that outlook on the game. And that's what the Swansea crowd want, and that's what the board are going to go for this time.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that we can't really criticise the board for, really, is the managerial appointments. I mean, even looking back at your appointment, we never seem to, from my time, we haven't had any, particularly bad managers or unsuccessful managers. We seem to appoint managers who are hungry for the opportunities, like yourself as an assistant at QPR, and I think we've been linked with a few managers. I think there's a few like Luke Williams at Notts County and Chris Davis, who's a coach at Spurs at the moment. So I like the way that we look at different managers and give good opportunities to young, hungry managers. So I think it's a good way of looking at it.
It is, and also as well, if you can put the structure in place that can help those guys to do what they do best, and to focus on the team, focus on the games coming up, and a lot of the structure and the work around them, you can put in place so that their concentration can be 100%, and you can have a successful period. And as you say, a lot of enthusiasm and hunger out of it. That they will, I think, go back to a playing style and work hard to try to get that connection between the players on the pitch and on the terraces. There's been some years now in the Championship, and everybody will want Swansea to be competing at the top end.
Yeah. I think I just touch on the just a quick one on the current squad for you. I know that you're obviously into the sort of recruitment side of it now, and you've mentioned that you've sort of looked at especially the under-21s and the academy in the Swans at the moment. I'm not sure how much you can show your hand here, but is there anyone in particular in the academy ranks or under-21s that stand out for you at the moment in the Swans?
I think there's several. I don't want to necessarily put pressure on those guys.
No, that's fair enough. He's gonna give the targets away now.
Yeah, I do think there's good players there. There are good players there. As ever, they'll need the right senior pros when they do come into the team, because it never just is about those young players. It's what they come into, and as much as good players, they need good people to come into, and good senior pros that can both deliver on the pitch, but are good enough people off the pitch to guide them in the right way. Swansea are a club. They're capable of getting into the Premier League. It's been done before, and the cycle will come round again for them. I do believe that. And while they're in the Championship, it'll take. I think that there does need to be a turnaround in the squad to be a successful squad. To be there's some of those players who have to improve and evolve, but they'll also need to be either players from the academy or players externally will have to come as well, to make sure that they can get a side that's capable, I think, of getting into the Prem.
So I'm just curious then. I know I'll put you in a theoretical situation here, and maybe it's a bit difficult to ask off the cuff, right? But I know you said you'd like to see the Swans a few times, and you might not be as clued up to everything that's going on at the club at the moment. But if you were the guy that was stepping into that dugout now, into those shoes, where would you look at the squad? What do you think the area is that needs the most focus and improvement on at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of capable players. I do think at times you need more pace.
Oh, that's we've said that so much. Yeah,
I do think that there's pace, and it's hard getting the combination now of players with pace, but have enough sort of understanding and product, because invariably those players, their goals and assists can be low, But even so, it does look like pace can help many areas of the pitch. It can help you transfer from attack to defence. It can help your recovery. It can certainly help you get behind defences and create the chances and the goals that you guys need to be able to win on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, definitely. Pace is something on the podcast we've been screaming for a long time. We were speaking the other day about Russell Martin and how he did at the Swans in the previous manager's tenure. I think his game plan and his style, he could get away with not having the pace that we just spoke about because of the slow build-up play, the patience. And I think maybe where Michael Duff maybe came unstuck a little bit was the fact that he wanted to change that a little bit, be a little bit more direct, but didn't have that option to maybe have the pace in both defence and attack, as you just mentioned. So I think that is a very important thing that we do need to focus on. Yeah.
The good Swansea sides that went up from the Championship and into the Prem. You had the likes of Sinclair, people like that could go past 2 or 3 players. If you wouldn't worry about one-on-one. Even if you doubled up on them, it was difficult. My sides played against Swansea during those times, and they passed the ball definitely. Passed the ball fantastically well, and people like Alan Tate and could control the game. By then they were mature enough, but also in the wide areas, there were players that could take people out of the game one-on-one, and as much as passing is important, being able to in the right areas go past your man and break a line. And as I said, Swansea at that time, and when they're working through, that even if you doubled up on them, they were capable of dropping their shoulder and going past both players, and it just opened up space for other players to score.
Yeah, definitely. I think we really appreciate the time you've given us coming on here. We've just got a couple of questions just to wrap up. I know obviously we've talked a lot about your time at the Swans, and we've talked a lot about Swansea as a whole, really. And that's it's part of your story. It's a chapter in your book, if you like. So we just want to ask if are there any other particular highlights from your managerial career. I know you had lots more successes, and you won the Johnston Pink Trophy again, or I know it changed name a few times. We won it again with Portsmouth, and promotion with Wolves, and a successful career at Millwall as well. Is there any other particular highlights that you like to talk about?
Yeah. In terms of my own career, Swansea got me established. Me and my family, because my children were young then. A fantastic place to spend some time, and it's being able to go back now it's a great career in terms of myself. But that was a great chapter in terms of myself, and I'm very proud to have been the Swansea manager with the connections in that area. For the rest of your career, you always want more, but I'm proud of what I've achieved, and while you always want more and want to develop into different areas, as I do now, and still as hungry for success, I do think that football as a whole has been good to me and my family, and I'm privileged to have been in it.
Yeah, and I know you said you don't necessarily see yourself perhaps going back to the dugout now with this experience of your new role. I was just wondering, did you ever get close to have any opportunities of touching at the Premier League? Or was that something that maybe you wish you could have got to potentially?
Yeah, I coached there for 2 clubs. I was a coach at Watford, assistant manager at Watford when we got in the Premier League, and then I was a coach at Man City for a short period of time, but didn't feel at either of those times that I would have got a job managing in the Premier League. That was where it was. So let's take the Man City one, and they were established at the time in the Premier League, but then I went down into League One to take Millwall to be a manager again. And that's your balance quite often. But I wouldn't change it necessarily. I'd spent, before I was a manager, I'd spent enough years coaching, and then by that time wanting to manage my own club. So was very lucky to have options, because quite often as well you can have maybe 1 or 2 jobs and and then not get any more. So for myself, and now in the new role, different roles have come up, and I've enjoyed every one, from being a player to a coach to a head coach or manager, if you like, and then now coming onto the planning and recruitment side, and advising the board.
Yeah, fair play. I've got a big question for you, and you were manager when we won the Johnson Paint Trophy, and Trundle scored that amazing goal in that final, and then you were also manager for Millwall in the playoff final when Gary Alexander scored one of the best Wembley goals I've ever seen. So the big question is, which one was better?
Which one was better? To be honest, that partnership of Akinfenwa and Trundle at that time were very, very good. And as I said, Bayo just got stopped by some shin injuries that held him up and hampered him, and stopped that partnership, if you like. We tried to strengthen them with other players, and just through that period, I didn't necessarily create the dynamics again that those two had. So they were instrumental for myself in terms of Bayo and Lee Trundle. So I would go for that period really, because it certainly put me on the map.
No, that's fair enough. I've got one more question as well, and maybe it's a tricky one, but I just want to know, what is the highlight of over everything from your entire career in football? Does not necessarily as a manager or coach, as a player, anything at all. What is the highlight of your time in football?
Probably playing for Wales with my mum and dad. Yep. in the stand with it was a big one. My debut for Wales, definitely. Playing at Wembley, England Wales as well was a big one. The amount of tickets I needed and the family I had at both games really was so being able to, let's say, break into, it was only a year or two in, could remember as a kid going to watch games, and then around about 18, 19, where you play first team football, and then 19, 20, I was playing international football. So that breakthrough was fantastic, and something that I'm very proud of.
Yeah, and I'd imagine you'll cherish them caps as well for the rest of your life as well.
Yeah, very much so. And it was, as I said, it was great avenue and opportunity for me.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, Kenny, and really appreciate you coming on. And I'm sure everyone that's been listening to the podcast so far, really, really interested in what you've had to say, and will remember a very special time in their club's history. And I'm sure, as Lee thanked you earlier, we're all grateful, and we all thank you for what you did for Swansea as a club. So if you've got any final words you want to mention, anything about what we chatted that maybe you didn't feel you got to touch on?
No, I've enjoyed it, and thinking back, and a lot of people there, a lot of very good memories.
Yeah.
And it's a club that is close to my heart, and one I'll always follow as well. So I've enjoyed talking about it, and watching how it develops now with the new appointment.
Yeah, it will definitely be interesting to see the direction we go now, and hopefully we can turn it back around and go in the right direction as well.
I'm sure it can. I'm sure back in the Premier League.
Yeah, and I know how fond, as I mentioned, everyone was for your time. I was speaking to Kev Johns the other day on here as well, and he had a lot of memories about your period as well. So it just speaks volumes about the stint that you had at the club, and very much appreciate getting to chat to you about it today. And thank you everyone for listening to this stage. Myself and Lee will thank you all as always. And if you'd like to leave any questions or let us know about your favourite time supporting the Swans under Kenny Jackett's reign, let us know in the comments, and it'll be interesting to see everyone's thoughts and memories from that time of Swansea City history. Obviously, featured in Jack to a King DVD, and there's a lot of stuff out there about this period in Swansea's history, but it's always good to reflect on the positive eras and all the good times. And on that note, we'll say goodbye. So thank you very much, Lee, and thank you very much, Kenny, for coming to speak to us today.
Pleasure, Luke, Lee. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
See you.
And we shall see you in the next episode.
Bye.